Hello again. As you can see, the engine is now red. I painted this engine red to help me diagnose any oil leaks in the future. With it being red, for example, if any leaks starting coming from the head gasket, I will see them running down the block like a black line. If the water pump starts leaking, you'll see the like rusty colour water escaping from places. Same with the oil pump there. Crank seal. Literally anywhere any oil or coolant is going to leak, you'll see lines running down the block from where it's come from. I managed to get the fan off in a fashion. The nut for it is still on. I don't know whether you can see that. The nut for it is still on. What happened was, I was trying to undo this nut and the bearing inside the viscous unit collapsed and the whole fan fell off. I've still got to undo that, but hands up, I made a rookie mistake. It was a schoolboy error. I was in a rush. I took the fan belt off, then the alternator off, before I remembered to take the fan off. But that's not a problem, because I might be using an electric fan with this going in a generator cabinet. Let's have a look around this engine and see how good it looks. You see, I dropped the knackered rocker cover back on just so that I didn't paint the actual rockers. Obviously, I've not painted the exhaust ports. Those, sorry about the light, those flat bits that aren't painted is where the gasket's going to go. So I've left them bare so that it seals properly. I've painted on top of the head, apart from where the water thermostat goes. I've not painted that for the same reason. If you leave that bare metal and just clean it up with a piece of sandpaper or something, emery paper, it'll seal better than having it painted. I've not painted where the diesel pump goes, just so that it actually seats properly and flat. I've taken, let me just see if I can hold the light with one hand. I've taken a pipe off from here that goes up and across to the thermostat, just to make it easier to paint. I didn't want to really take this metal pipe off because there's a gasket there and I didn't really want to disturb that. But what I've done, I've painted all the way up past the gasket and like painted the gap that would be between the pipe and the front plate of the engine, just to help seal it a bit more, and again to tell me if there's any leaks I can see them. I painted over the core plugs. Don't worry about painting over the core plugs. The reason is, if ice builds up in this engine, it will force them out and it'll chip the paint off and they'll come off anyway. I painted around all these nuts and fittings and around the oil filter. I painted everywhere, literally everywhere. Let's go around the back. So I've not obviously painted down past where the bell housing normally goes, but I've painted the top of the head. But you'll see the actual split where the head is there. So if anything's leaking from the head or from this core plug, I'll see it running down there anyway. And then when I get this adapter plate where the bell housing used to go, I'll paint that red as well. And the other side is also painted, apart from where the exhaust manifold sits and where that's where the lift pump sits for the fuel. If you ever have any problems starting a van in the morning, or if it's starting to be really, really slow, check these nuts that hold the fuel lift pump on, because sometimes they can rattle loose and it can come out slightly. And then the bar that actuates it from the camshaft doesn't actually work it properly, and it won't be sucking diesel out of the tank and putting it up to the injection pump. I painted the sump, painted over various nuts and bolts and things. Yeah, it's looking good. One of the other reasons I've done this is, to be honest, I've not had the chance to get any parts for this yet. Everywhere's been shut for Christmas and New Year, apart from Halfords, which is a parts place in the UK. Probably similar to Harbour Freight in America. But they mostly specialise in car spares and paints and accessories and things. So I got the red paint and just decided while I was waiting for Christmas and New Year to pass, I'd just paint the engine. Makes it look a little bit better. I know red isn't the actual colour that Ford engines are. If you buy a static engine from Ford, or stationary engine from Ford, or tractor engine for that matter from Ford, they normally come in blue. But I couldn't get blue from Halfords, not in the high temperature paint anyway. And I thought red would show up leaks more than what blue would. Blue's quite a dark colour. If you're using blue coolant and you've got the engine painted blue, it's a little bit harder to see. But then again, if you're using red paint and red coolant, that's going to be hard to see, apart from it being rusty. So we shall see. I've not been doing too well at home. My mum took a fall on the 26th of December late at night, and she broke a hip. And she's gone into hospital and had a hip fixed. She's not had a hip replacement, she's had a hip repaired. I'll just show you some more shots of this engine while I'm telling you. Yeah, so I've been worrying about my mum and getting things ready at home and going to see her. So I've not really had that much chance to get any parts for this engine. Plus, everywhere's closed anyway. I have found there's a gentleman in a town near me that's got 2 mk5 transit vans, and he said that I can go and take some parts off the engines of one of them or both of them. Oh, this little pocket here, I've left that not painted. The reason is, depending on what kind of timing belt tensioner you put on, sometimes it's just a round bearing that sits on that peg and that bolt. But other times there's actually it's a sprung loaded. Let me just go back and explain. The round one, the bearing one that just sits on this bolt and holds onto that pin, I think, that's just an eccentric cam type. And what happens is you put an Allen key in and turn the Allen key, and the eccentric cam makes it tighten the cam belt, the timing belt. Okay. The other style is, excuse me, spring loaded, self-tensioning. What happens is you've got a spring set that fits in there. It's like a plunger with a spring on it. It does bolt onto there, and I'm thinking that it bolts into that hole as well. And what happens is, I think from what I can remember, there's a cable tie holding it shut, or a zip tie if you want, if you're American, holding it closed, and you post it into that pocket there, bolt it up, and then cut the zip tie from what I can remember, and it expands to fill that pocket, and that tightens the timing belt then. That, I think, is the original old style, and the bearing, the eccentric bearing one, that's the new style that just goes on this bolt and you tighten it with an Allen key. Obviously, the one that's sprung loaded, that's got a little bit of give in it. Every time the timing belt comes around, you know, if down here it's flapping around a little bit, because they do. They're not supposed to be as solid as metal. They're supposed to have a little, like a quarter of an inch maybe, or a little bit less flex, excuse me. They're supposed to have a little bit of flex, maybe just less than a quarter of an inch to go up and down. Well, that spring takes up the slack, so that when the timing belt's bouncing up and down, when it's going around and around all these pulleys and whatnot, that spring's actually working and going in and out to keep the timing belt tight, you know, to take the flex out so that it's not really moving. I've got the pulley for there, I've taken off and it's there. I can't get that pulley off, but I'm not bothered at the minute. Like I say, this engine might be having a electrical fan upgrade, because if you remember, let's just go up to the bench and find the thermostat housing. So this thermostat housing, as you can see, has got, let me just prop the light so that you can see, it's got two temperature senders. That's the original one for the dashboard. That's your temperature sensor for your gauge. This one on the back is for the EPIC system, the what do you call it, the computerized fuel injection system, the EPIC they call it at Ford. That's the ECU variant. I don't need that because I'm using a mechanical pump, so I could take that off and put a fan switch in there, and then obviously put an electrical radiator fan on in the cabinet and have this engine electrically cooled, which will be better. More convenient for me because I don't have to mess around with a viscous coupling, and the fan might be in the wrong place for the cabinet because it's not in a transit van, it's in a cabinet. So that will give me the flexibility to put the fan pretty much where I want it and just run extra long top and bottom radiator hoses to it, because I think they're the same diameter. I think that pipe there that's on the top of the thermostat is the same diameter as the actual radiator port. So if I measure the pipe that goes on there, I can just get a longer piece and I can route it to the radiator. And again, I think, let's just have a look. I think that's your bottom hose port. I don't know whether you can see it. So that's your bottom hose port, and I think that's the same diameter as the outlet on the radiator. So again, I'll just be able to get a bit longer pipe and put the radiator where I want it in the cabinet and run an electrical fan. You see, if the fan was there, it's not in the centre of the engine, because on the Chinese engine, the fan is in the centre and it's a little higher up. That's not quite in the right place, that pulley, so I couldn't put it there. Plus it's not threaded anyway for a fan. That's not threaded. That's where the fan goes on a transit engine normally, but that is in the wrong place for the cabinet that's on the truck. So I think I might have to use a electrical fan anyway, but that's no problem, because the alternator that's on this engine has literally only got to charge the batteries. You can see I've been working on this. It's got no lights or heater matrix fan to run. It's got no entertainment system, no air conditioning to run. It's literally, the alternator will literally only be charging the battery on the generator. So what I could do, I could get away with using an electrical fan, and you know, the alternator would cope with that. That's no problem. Yeah. Well, let me know what you think to the red engine. And if you don't mind, if you're watching this, give my mum some love in the comments down below, that's still sat in the hospital nearly a week after she's broke her hip. Had an operation, and she should be coming out either tomorrow or in a couple of days' time. And she's going to be at home laid up, and I'm going to be looking after her with my sons. So yeah, give me mum some love in the comments, and let me know what you think to this red engine. Let me know whether you think that painting this engine was a good idea or not. I personally chewed over it for a few days and decided to do this. I thought the pros outweighed the cons. Yes, I can appreciate if I need to change the water pump or anything else, if I need to take the head off or like the oil filter needs replacing, yes, it's going to be slightly more awkward to do it with the engine painted red because I'm going to have to overcome the paint to get the parts off. I'm going to have to chip the paint to get the parts off. But that's not a problem. I'll just get a tin of red paint, and if I say have to change the water pump, I'll just paint the new water pump red, put it on, paint around the edges. That's one thing. Yeah, I'm going to have to chip the paint off the bolt heads as well, or like when I put the socket on, I'm going to have to bang the socket on to actually get the socket onto the painted bolt heads. But that's something that I will quite happily live with. Also, when I have replaced a part, what I'm planning on doing is painting around the edge of it to seal it to the engine as well, so that if it's thinking of leaking, the paint may well stop it leaking long enough for me to do an event with the engine and get away with it. Again, that needs fixing or replacing. I could straighten that up and knock the filler cap out, and I've got a welder, I could just weld around it to make it sealed. And it's not, the rocker cover's not really in bad condition, to be fair. While we're here, in fact, I'm just going to try something. Sorry about the darkness. I have seen these marinised engines. I can't get off with one hand. Yes, I can. I've seen the marinised engines with the oil filler cap this end, but this rocker cover won't fit like that. It's sculptured. You see in that corner, it's cut to miss the thermostat housing, and obviously this end it's not. It's just a 90-degree square. So that must be a different rocker cover on the marinised engines. I have seen. Let's just go to the bench. This is the air intake. I have seen these engines, obviously the air intake goes that way up and the actual air pipe comes out in over the top. I have seen the marinised engines, again, with the air intake this end, but obviously that's a different air intake. Let me just put that down. One thing I am going to have to overcome, the exhaust manifold down there. In the generator cabinet this engine's going in, the exhaust comes straight up near enough and like across here towards me, and then out the roof of the cabinet through like a big square silencer block. The exhaust on this is going to be pointing down, because this is for a van, and normally the exhaust goes down under the chassis of the van and out towards that side on the van. So I may well have to try to put the exhaust manifold on upside down. Well, not this bit. This bit can stay where it is. Sorry, my apologies. That bit can stay where it is, but when it comes to the part that the turbo is bolted onto, I may have to loosen the bolts on the turbo and twist that block there so that that joint is pointing up in the air like it is there. But obviously I've got to keep the turbo pointed in the right direction, because the oil pipes, the feed and the return pipes, if I just turn the turbo upside down, the feed and return pipes will be in the wrong place. So what I may have to do is loosen the bolts. I don't know whether you can see them. Usually you would undo the bolts completely to split the turbo to change the cassette inside it. But what I might have to do is just slacken them off and twist the cassette round inside the turbo's housing and then tighten the bolts back up, so that that joint there is pointing up rather than down, so that I can, or I might just weld exhaust bands onto it. I don't know yet. I'll get to that when I get to it. But yeah, there you have it. This pulley wheel's got a chunk missing out of it, but it's only the front. Now, that's not a problem to me, because that front pulley is just for the power steering. That doesn't do anything else other than the power steering. You see how, let me just see if I can lodge the light. So this pulley's in two parts. This front section here is for the power steering belt, which goes off down here to the pump. It's this back part that I'm more interested in, and in fact it's in three parts. So these teeth are for the timing belt. These teeth are for the auxiliary belt, or fan belt you might call it, and then this front bit's for the power steering. And luckily this smashes only out of the front rim where it would be for the power steering. I'm not bothered about changing that. I'll leave it as it is. But obviously I'm not going to be using the power steering because it's not going to be in a van. It doesn't have to be steered. You know, this is going to be a stationary engine, so I'm not bothered about that pulley wheel being broke there, as long as it doesn't shatter, you know, when I'm running it. But I haven't got a torque wrench that I can torque that bolt back up with, because I think they're horrendously tight and you've got to get them right. What I might do is leave it for now and just run it with the split. I'm not bothered about that. But when it comes to probably changing the front crankcase bearing, I might get someone else to do it, another mechanic that's got the tools, because I only buy tools when I need to do a job. I'm not a mechanic myself. I'm not a mechanic by trade. The only tools that I've got is what I've bought to do specific things with. And I've done a lot to transit engines, so I've got the sockets and ratchets and spanners and everything for that, and torque spits and whatnot. But I haven't got, I see no point in me buying a torque wrench to tighten that bolt that goes up to something stupid like 400 or 500 Newton meters when I don't use it all the time. I might as well pay someone £40, £50, £100 to change the crankcase bearing and provide them with a different pulley wheel at the same time. You know, it's, when you think about how much the torque wrench is going to cost to replace that bolt just for me to change that pulley wheel, it's not worth it. I might as well just pay another mechanic to do that for me. Everything else that needs bolting to the engine, I do have a torque wrench that will cope with that amount of Newton meters or foot-pounds. It's like this bolt. I wouldn't undo that myself. If I had a problem with the camshaft, I'd take it to someone else, another mechanic that could do it, because again, that's probably torqued up to 300 or 400, maybe 500 Newton meters, and I'm not buying a torque wrench just to do two bolts, if you know what I mean. So yeah, there's been another guy on YouTube called Paul who's been passing comments backwards and forwards. I think he said he's in Poland. We've had some interesting conversations. Thank you, Paul. If you've got a transit van yourself and you want to send me pictures of engines and vans and different things you've done, I've got a YouTube, I've got a business, Nelson's Rides and Attractions. So if you want to send, if you want to look up the website, Nelson's Rides and Attractions, and then find the email address, it is enquiries at nelsonsridesandattractions.co.uk. I'm more than willing to, well, I like seeing what other people have done with their engines and vans, and I've been a fan of the transit van for years. So if you want to send pictures and even ask questions, you know, hit that email address up. I'm more than happy to answer questions. Oh yeah, If you ever have a problem where the van takes a long time to start whilst cranking in the morning, check these pipes, because one of them could be split or off. They're leak-off pipes. What basically happens with them is, see here, it's got an outlet. That is the return to the diesel tank, and that particular fitting has a little pipe that goes back to the diesel filter, and then it goes back to the tank. If you're ever having problems and it's taking a long time to fire when you're cranking it, check them pipes, because they could be leaking. Even if they're not leaking diesel out, they could be leaking air in. Even this little plug here, if that comes off, it might not leak diesel out, but it might let air into the diesel system. It might be worth changing them pipes for fresh pipes if you're having a lot of struggle getting it started. I always say, if you have a problem with your van, especially with transits, go for the cheapest thing first. You know, check them pipes, check all the pipes to the tank, check, like I've shown you, where the lift pump goes. Check them bolts are tight before you go buying anything, or, you know, before you get a mechanic to come round and, say for instance you have got the Epic system like Paul said he has. Before you have the ECU read and any faults, you know, any codes read, and pay for that, check the simple things first. You know, go from the cheapest to the most expensive. Check that your timing belt's tight. Check that your fan belt's tight, you know. Check that your battery's charged up properly. Check that you've got fuel in. One way to check if fuel is coming up to the engine is undo one of these injector unions, not all the way off so that the pipe comes off, but just loosen it a little bit. Turn the key and crank the engine, and if diesel sprays out of here, you know you've got to check them all really. You know you've got diesel coming through the injection pump to there. One of the other things that the transit van suffers from, this engine, is on the back of the fuel pump, which would, obviously, this is a fuel pump housing here, and the fuel pump would sit back here near the dipstick. Right at the back, not far from where this bracket is, on the back of the fuel pump, on the mechanical ones, there's a stop solenoid. Sometimes the wire burns off of that and disconnects. Check that that's still connected. It should be on like, I think it's an 8mm nut that it's got a ring tag connected to. That's one of your other common faults with these engines. Pardon me. It's freezing. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm in the garage at the minute. And it's absolutely freezing. I tipped this engine the other day and I leaked a load of oil out. Oops. Anyway, I thought I'd bring you that quick update, seeing as I've not mentioned anything for a while. Yeah, let me know what you think to the red engine. If you've got any questions, feel free to comment and ask. I'll answer them if I can. If I've done that sort of thing before on these transit engines, I'll answer the question. Let me know what you think to the red paint, and give my mum some love who's in hospital with a broken hip. See you later.